Volcanoes are among nature's most awe-inspiring forces. When they erupt, they don't just spew lava, they unleash chaos, heat, and toxic gases capable of wiping out entire towns within moments. These aren't just natural disasters, they're human tragedies frozen in time, where ordinary people faced unimaginable horror. In this video, we explore 5 of the most disturbing volcano-related deaths ever recorded that reveal just how helpless even the strongest among us can be when the Earth itself decides to erupt in fury. On January 17, 2002, the earth beneath Goma began to shudder a low, thunderous growl that seemed to come from the depths of hell itself. Within minutes, Mount Nyiragongo had erupted, sending a blazing torrent of molten rock tearing down its slopes toward the city. The people of Goma didn't have hours to react, they had minutes. Streets turned into glowing rivers of fire moving faster than cars could drive, swallowing homes, markets, and entire neighborhoods in a matter of moments. The air filled with a choking mix of ash and burning gas, and the sky turned a haunting shade of red as the ground literally melted beneath fleeing residents. Mount Nyiragongo wasn't just erupting, it was chasing them. The lava, unlike most in the world, was incredibly fluid, flowing as fast as 60 kilometers per hour. It sliced the city in two, igniting fuel stations, trapping families inside collapsing buildings, and leaving behind nothing but smoldering ruins. Around 250 people lost their lives that day. Some burned where they stood, others suffocated under the heavy blanket of toxic fumes that spread as the lava met the air. Survivors described hearing the hiss of molten rock approaching long before they saw it, a horrifying sound that grew louder until everything around them was devoured by fire. But what made this eruption so horrifying wasn't just the destruction, it was its intimacy. Goma wasn't a distant village on the slopes of a mountain, it was a city of nearly 500,000 people, a place filled with children walking to school and parents cooking breakfast when the world turned to fire. By nightfall, nearly 120,000 people were left homeless. Entire families camped on the streets or fled barefoot across the border into Rwanda, carrying what little they could as the ground trembled beneath them. Streets that once carried laughter and life were reduced to blackened wastelands, carved through by molten scars still hissing with heat. From above, NASA satellites captured surreal red ribbons glowing through the city, not lights, but liquid fire, weaving their way toward Lake Kivu. Scientists feared something even worse, that the lava could disturb the lake's gas-rich depths and release a deadly cloud of carbon dioxide and methane, like the one that suffocated entire villages at Lake Nyos in Cameroon years earlier. Thankfully, that second disaster never came, but the terror it inspired has never truly left. In the weeks that followed, hundreds of aftershocks rattled the region, toppling already weakened buildings and sending waves of panic through displaced survivors. Aid workers described Goma as a city built on a wound that never stopped bleeding. Mount Nyiragongo remains one of the most dangerous volcanoes on Earth. Its lava lake still bubbles deep within, and every tremor is a reminder that beneath Goma's fragile calm lies a sleeping giant capable of turning life to ash in seconds. For the people who survived 2002, it wasn't just an eruption. It was a vision of the apocalypse, a night when the Earth itself opened up and swallowed their world whole. In late October 2010, Indonesia's Mount Merapi erupted with terrifying power, marking one of the deadliest volcanic disasters in modern history. At first, it started with low, distant rumbles that locals had grown used to hearing over the years, a familiar sound from one of the world's most active volcanoes. But this time was different. The earth began to tremble more violently. Animals fled down the slopes, and within hours, Merapi exploded with unimaginable force. A massive column of ash shot nearly 10 miles into the sky, and the once green mountainside turned into a roaring furnace of fire, smoke, and molten rock. Lava poured down the volcano's slopes, But what made this eruption truly terrifying were the pyroclastic flows of fast-moving clouds of gas, ash, and rock that raced downhill at over 700 degrees Celsius, moving faster than a car. Entire villages were obliterated in seconds. People who tried to flee were overtaken by waves of searing heat, their homes and fields reduced to ash. The roar of the volcano was deafening, echoing for miles as lightning flashed through the dark clouds of smoke above. More than 350 people were killed and hundreds more severely injured. Nearly 400,000 were forced to flee their homes, carrying what little they could as they ran through choking clouds of ash and debris. Hospitals overflowed with burn victims, and rescuers struggled to reach survivors through the thick, suffocating air. The eruption didn't happen all at once. It came in waves, with violent explosions continuing for weeks, each one worse than the last. Every night the sky glowed red as Merapi spewed fire, and every dawn revealed a new stretch of destruction. Among the dead was Emba Marijan, a beloved 83-year-old known as the spiritual gatekeeper of Mount Merapi. For decades, he had performed traditional rituals to calm the volcano's spirit and protect the local people. When government officials ordered evacuations, he refused to leave his village, saying, "If I leave, who will look after Merapi?" His loyalty cost him his life. Rescuers found him later, kneeling in prayer, his body preserved in a layer of ash, a haunting image that came to symbolize both faith and fatal devotion. The aftermath was apocalyptic. Entire communities were buried beneath meters of volcanic ash. Crops were destroyed, rivers were clogged with debris, and roofs collapsed under the weight of falling dust. The city of Yogyakarta, 30 kilometers away, was blanketed in gray. The air smelled of sulfur and smoke, and the once lively towns near the mountain fell silent. Even months later, steam continued to rise from the blackened earth, a grim reminder of the mountain's fury. The 2010 eruption of Mount Merapi was the most powerful since 1872, and it changed the lives of everyone who lived in its shadow. It was not just a natural disaster, it was a confrontation between humanity and nature's raw, unstoppable power. Those who survived would never forget the sound of the mountain's rage, the rain of ash that turned day into night, and the sight of a fiery river swallowing the world they once knew. For Indonesia, Merapi was not just a volcano, it was a living reminder that the earth itself can awaken without warning and remind us how fragile life truly is.
An Australian man has described how he said his goodbyes as best he could to his parents and sister before he left them dead or dying in the crater of Whakaari, White Island.
It was supposed to be a once-in-a-lifetime adventure, a guided walk through the steaming, alien landscape of New Zealand's Whakaari, also known as White Island. Tourists arrived that morning smiling, snapping photos, their shoes crunching over the yellow sulfur crusts, while the distant hiss of vents filled the air. The volcano was restless, but no one imagined it would erupt. Guides reassured them that White Island had always been active, and that this was part of its charm. Just beneath their feet, though, superheated water and gas were building toward a breaking point. At 2:11 p.m. on December 9th, 2019, the mountain exploded. Without a single warning siren, a deafening roar shattered the stillness, and a massive white cloud burst from the crater, rising thousands of feet into the air. Tourists who were standing near the rim were hit first by a wave of boiling gas, ash, and rock, traveling faster than anyone could run. It was a phreatic eruption, one of nature's cruelest surprises, triggered when superheated water trapped underground suddenly turned to steam, bursting through the earth with the power of a bomb. In seconds, the clear blue sky turned black. The ash cloud consumed everything. People screamed for their loved ones, choking as toxic gas filled their lungs. Cameras and phones kept recording as chaos unfolded. Haunting footage later showed tourists running toward the shoreline, their skin peeling and clothes in flames. Boats waiting offshore watched in horror as the eruption swallowed the island, unsure whether to flee or rush in to help. Of the 47 people on the island, 22 never came home. Some died instantly, others clung to life for days or weeks in hospitals, their bodies burned by ash and boiling mud. Those who survived carried scars that would never fade. Many were cruise ship passengers from Australia and the United States, drawn to the island's raw beauty, unaware that the same force that made it breathtaking could turn deadly without warning. Rescue missions began almost immediately, and they were acts of pure bravery. 3 helicopter pilots, ignoring official orders to stay away, flew through thick ash clouds and toxic air to pull survivors from the smoldering island. They found people burned beyond recognition, some still conscious, whispering for water. They saw bodies scattered near the crater and along the beach, but had to make an impossible choice: save the living and leave the dead behind. Back on the mainland, hospitals filled with victims suffering from burns, covering up to 90% of their bodies. Medical teams worked around the clock, using skin grafts flown in from across the world. Families waited in agony for news, many hearing nothing for days. The scale of the tragedy was almost unimaginable. Couples, parents, and children torn apart in an instant. The eruption didn't just devastate lives, it sparked outrage. Wakari had been showing signs of unrest for weeks. Scientists had raised its alert level to moderate to heightened volcanic unrest just days before, warning that an eruption was possible. Yet tours continued. Operators assured visitors the island was safe, insisting there was always some level of risk, but that nothing like this had ever happened during a tour. That illusion of safety vanished in an instant. In the months that followed, grief turned to anger. Investigations revealed that both the island's owners and several tour operators had failed to properly protect visitors. Legal battles stretched on for years, as survivors and families demanded accountability. WorkSafe New Zealand charged multiple companies and individuals for failing to ensure the safety of workers and tourists. Courtrooms filled with testimony describing how warnings were ignored and how thrill-seeking tourism had come before caution. While the lawsuits dragged on, Wakari itself remained eerily quiet, a scarred island surrounded by turquoise sea, still steaming, still alive. Tourists are no longer allowed to visit, and the once bustling boat tours are gone. The only sounds now are the waves and the hiss of vents, reminders of the day the volcano claimed 22 lives in a matter of minutes. Even years later, the images still haunt anyone who's seen them. A sky split in two by fire and steam, survivors stumbling toward rescue boats covered in ash, rescuers weeping as they carried the injured. It was a disaster that unfolded in real time, broadcast across the world, a reminder that even in an age of science and technology, nature remains unpredictable and merciless.
This is the moment a sunny Saturday morning on Mount Ontake suddenly turned deadly.
It was a crisp autumn morning in Japan. The sky above the Mount Ontake was a perfect blue, the air cool and clear. Hundreds of people were scattered across the trails, snapping photos, chatting, and admiring the fiery fall colors that painted the slopes. There was no sense of danger, no tremors, no warning signs from the earth beneath their feet. But at 11:52 a.m., without the slightest hint of mercy, the mountain exploded. A violent roar shattered the calm. In an instant, a massive cloud of ash and steam burst from the summit, shooting thousands of feet into the air. Hikers who had been smiling seconds earlier were suddenly blinded by darkness as the sky turned gray and the ground shook beneath them. It wasn't lava that came for them. It was something far more terrifying. A Friedic eruption, where superheated water underground turns into explosive steam, launching ash, rocks, and toxic gas at incredible speed. People screamed and ran, but there was nowhere to go. Within seconds, the slopes of Mount Ontake became a battlefield of fire and stone. Rocks the size of basketballs rained from the sky, smashing into hikers' helmets and tearing through their backpacks. Ash poured down like snow, choking the air and coating everything in a suffocating gray. Visibility dropped to zero. Those near the summit were hit first. The heat, the gas, and the flying debris left them with no chance to escape. Videos recovered from the scene later showed the sheer panic hikers huddled under shelters, clutching their faces as the ash storm roared past. The sound was deafening, like a jet engine mixed with thunder. Within minutes, the landscape was unrecognizable. What had been a peaceful trail turned into a graveyard of twisted trees and ash-covered bodies. Rescue teams tried desperately to reach survivors, but the eruption had made the mountain too dangerous. Helicopters hovered above, barely able to see through the thick smoke and toxic gases. Those who managed to descend were burned, battered, and in shock, their hair and clothes singed, their skin covered in blisters from the scalding heat. For many others, help would come too late. By nightfall, more than 30 people were missing. Search teams climbed through waist-deep ash, digging with bare hands, but they found only tragedy. One by one, bodies were discovered. Hikers who had tried to shield themselves behind rocks or inside small shelters, overcome by gas and heat. In total, 63 lives were lost, making it Japan's deadliest volcanic eruption in decades. Some were found holding on to friends or family, their final moments frozen in gray ash. The days that followed were marked by heartbreak and disbelief. Families gathered at the mountain's base, waiting for news that never came. Rescuers risked their lives again and again, climbing into deadly gas zones only to be forced back by fresh bursts of steam and falling debris. The grief soon turned to anger. Families of the victims demanded to know why no warning had been issued. Seismic readings had shown minor tremors before the eruption, but officials had deemed them insignificant. In 2017, several families filed lawsuits against the Japanese government and Nagano Prefecture, arguing that the alert level should have been raised before the eruption. The authorities responded that the data had not suggested imminent danger, but for those who had lost loved ones, that explanation offered little comfort. It was November night in 1985 when the small Colombian town of Armero slipped into darkness, unaware that death was already racing down the mountain. Nevado del Ruiz, the white-capped giant that had slept for nearly 7 decades, awoke with a roar that shook the heavens. At first, there was only the faint rumble of thunder, muffled by a passing storm. Then, from the volcano's snow-covered summit, fire and ash erupted skyward, followed by something far more terrifying. A river of boiling mud and ice that would soon erase an entire town from existence. The mountain's wrath came in silence. By the time the first lahar, a massive volcanic mudflow descended the slopes, the people of Armero were sleeping or praying, unaware that their fate had already been sealed. The molten material melted the glaciers that crowned Nevado del Ruiz, sending 4 enormous waves of mud and debris hurtling down the valleys at speeds of over 50 kilometers per hour. The lahars picked up rocks, trees, and even houses as they thundered through the darkness. Within minutes, the rivers turned into walls of sludge, devouring everything in their path. In Armero, panic came too late. Power lines went dead, radios went silent, and then a roar like 1,000 freight trains filled the air. The earth began to tremble beneath their feet. People ran into the streets as a black wall approached, swallowing the town whole. Cars were lifted and hurled aside like toys. Homes crumbled and disappeared under 30 feet of mud. Mothers clung to their children, screaming names into the dark, only to be silenced by the weight of the earth itself. By dawn, nearly 23,000 souls had been buried alive. When rescuers finally arrived 12 hours later, they were met with a sight that defied belief. Those who survived were trapped waist-deep in thick, steaming mud, their cries echoing into the mist. Even the rescuers struggled to move. Every step threatened to pull them under. And then came the image that would haunt the world forever. The face of a young girl named Omaira Sanchez. Trapped beneath the wreckage of her home, the 13-year-old was pinned by concrete and debris. For 3 days, she clung to life while rescue workers and reporters gathered around her. Her calm voice, her haunting courage, and her innocent words became a symbol of the tragedy. "I want to go to school," she whispered, her eyes wide and tired. When asked if she was scared, she shook her head. "I just want to rest." Despite desperate efforts, she could not be freed. She died after 60 hours, her body sinking beneath the muddy water that had claimed her home, her family, and her town. But the most painful truth was this: it didn't have to happen. Scientists had warned for weeks that Nevado del Ruiz was about to erupt. Hazard maps were drawn, evacuation plans were proposed, but bureaucracy, politics, and disbelief stood in the way. Local authorities were told to stay calm, to avoid panic. Many residents were assured that they were safe, even as ash rained from the sky. On the night of the eruption, when emergency calls began flooding in, radio communication failed. The storm drowned out the volcano's warning cries, and so thousands stayed inside waiting for the danger to pass. When the sun rose, there was no town left to save. Armero, once home to nearly 29,000 people, had become a mass grave. The few who crawled out alive wandered through miles of sludge in shock, searching for their loved ones. Entire families had vanished without a trace. A banner at a mass funeral read, "The volcano didn't kill 22,000 people. The government killed them." The Armero tragedy became one of the deadliest volcanic disasters in modern history, second only to Mount Pelé's eruption in 1902. It was not just the story of a volcano, but a story of human failure. Neglect, pride, and disbelief had allowed a mountain's whisper to become a nation's scream. In the aftermath, the Colombian government faced public outrage and international scrutiny. The world asked how so many could die when the danger was known in advance. From this anger came change. New systems for volcanic monitoring, new emergency protocols, and the creation of the Volcano Disaster Assistance Program. But for the people of Armero, none of that mattered anymore.